Here are 3 true scary stories from Reddit. The links to the stories are in the description below. Enjoy. Number 1. So, this is probably one of the scariest things I have ever experienced, and I thought I'd share it on here. A bit of background. When I was 13, my mother and I lived in a duplex in a pretty average neighborhood where nothing really ever happened. Due to the fact that we lived in a duplex, which is 2 houses attached to each other, our neighbors were directly on the other side of our garage wall. Our neighbors were Gary and Rebecca, whom we referred to as Beck. Beck didn't talk to us other than a hello if she was outside when we got home. And Gary always greeted us every day with the same toothless smile that made my skin crawl. Upstairs were the bedrooms and a bathroom, and downstairs were the kitchen, dining room, lounge room, and the garage. These rooms were all just one big open space, so you could see each room from the other rooms. Our dining room had a sliding glass door that led to the backyard. There were 2 little chairs and a table where my mom and her friends would sit and talk when she had company over. The incident happened on my 13th birthday. I had 2 friends over, Jackie and Lola, and we were all upstairs in the bathroom. I had a little iPod speaker downstairs playing music loud enough that we could hear it. It certainly wasn't loud enough to be blasting through the entire neighborhood. My mom and her friend had gone to a local store and assumed we'd be fine, being home alone only for 20 minutes or so. After a while, I went downstairs to change the song or turn it up. I can't remember which. The front door was closed but unlocked because nothing ever really happened in our neighborhood, so we never really locked it, unless we weren't home or we were asleep. I jumped down the stairs and turned the corner to walk into the dining room when I saw Gary just sitting at the table. I immediately stopped in my tracks. I cannot describe the fear that came over me, but I kept my cool and asked him what he was doing here. He was clearly intoxicated and just said he wanted us to turn the music down because he's trying to settle down his partner. I went over to the table, turned the iPod speaker off, and told him I would keep it down, but he has to leave. He got up, and instead of going to the front door, he went to the back sliding door. He told me he was gonna wait for my mom to get home out back. I firmly told him no, and that he had to leave. Fortunately, he agreed and walked out the front door. Unknown to me, my 2 friends had been watching from the stairs, and after Gary left, I locked the front door and broke down crying. They both came down to comfort me and made sure the rest of the house was locked. My mom came home soon after and I told her what happened. She already was not a fan of Gary, but the fact that he had just come into our house and scared her 13-year-old daughter probably pushed her over the edge. My mom and her friend went outside and started yelling at him. He was sitting outside his house as if nothing ever happened. He decided to come over where my mom was and yelled back. Unfortunately for him, he was met with a punch in the face. That might have been the coolest thing my mom has ever done. I immediately called the police because they were close to having an all-out brawl outside the house. The police showed up within 10 minutes. By then, the fight had stopped and Gary had locked himself inside his house, but left Rebecca outside, so we could hear her asking to be let in. We told the police what happened. They told us technically they couldn't charge him with anything because it wasn't breaking and entering. It was just entering. They decided to take him to the station overnight until he sobered up. They went over to his house and asked him to open the door. My friends and I watched from my bedroom window because it allowed us to see my whole driveway and their driveway too. He had barricaded himself inside while Beck continued yelling desperately for him to open the door. After 15 minutes of this, he finally came outside and the police put him in the back of their car. Before he got in, I heard him laugh and say, "Well, I guess I won't do that again." After that, he never really bothered us, other than continuing to say hello. They were evicted a couple of months later and luckily, we never saw them again. So, Creepy neighbor that decided to enter my house. Let's not ever meet again. Thanks. Number 2. This is my first time posting on here, and I'm on a mobile, so I apologize for any spelling or grammatical errors. I've been reading these stories for hours and figured I'd share some of my own creepy experience. When I was growing up, I would always have friends over and we would play outside, in my front yard. Cars would only drive by maybe once an hour, so a lot of the time we would be playing in the street. I lived in a pretty nice neighborhood. It was quiet and consisted of 90% old people, so my mom was never worried about us being outside alone. But that eventually changed. It all started when I was 10. I had invited a few of my friends over to hang out. They were all into sports, so they decided they were going to kick around a soccer ball in the street, while I probably played with my cat. I was bored and looking around when I noticed my neighbor, who I called Creepy Steve, across the street sitting in his garage. This was normal enough to me because ever since I was little, he would sit out there in front of a small TV for most of the day. This time was different though. I started looking closer at him and realized that Steve had binoculars up to his face. Strange, I thought. The only thing in front of his garage he could see was my house. There were no birds or animals that were interesting enough to want to watch. Just us. I turned to my friends and pointed it out. They agreed that it was strange, but we shrugged it off and continued to play. A little while later, I glanced into Creepy Steve's garage again. This time, he had a camera, and he was pointing it at me. I started to freak out. He then noticed all of us talking about him, and he went inside. A few minutes later, we see that his front door is open, and someone has a camera held up to the glass. We still continued playing in the street, and were freaked out a bit, but we didn't go inside. Eventually, he comes back outside and walks out of the garage. He grabs a small bench from his porch and sets it down on the edge of his yard, just a few feet away from us. More out of curiosity of what he was going to do next, we continued chatting and playing. Why we didn't run away? I don't know. He starts mumbling things and my friends ignore him, but I can't help but listen closely. He starts saying things about our appearance. Through his mumbles I hear, "So beautiful, gorgeous." Then, unmistakably, I clearly heard him say, "I want to lick your pussy." I was young, but I knew what that meant, and I was done being near that man. So I went inside and told my mom. She was obviously shocked and disgusted, and went to do something about it. Coincidentally, the neighbor living right next to Steve is a cop, so my mom goes out there and tells him the story. The cops show up at his house and talk to him and the lady that lives with him. The cops couldn't really do anything because they had no proof he actually did or said these things. The lady at the house claims that Steve's a friend and she's letting him live with her. She had no idea he was like this and was going to tell him to leave. So, Creepy Steve leaves that night. My family is relieved. But after a few days, he comes back. My mom was hesitant in letting me go outside after that. If we did, she would watch me and my friends playing from the window. One day, a few months later, my friends and I were laying in my front yard, talking and looking up at the stars. Then, Creepy Steve's window opens. He's naked and stands there for a minute as we freak out, because our innocent eyes have never seen anything like that before. He then closes the window. I didn't tell my mom about that incident. He didn't do anything after that, until 7 years later. In July of last year, my friend and I arrived at my house around 10 p.m. after going on one of our summer driving adventures. She planned on staying the night, so she parked at the bottom of my driveway. We sat in her car with the windows down, talking and laughing pretty loud about our lives, friend drama, etc. What we didn't know was Creepy Steve had his windows open, and he could hear us. Just recently, he entered a phase where he liked to blast his music so loud that the entire neighborhood could hear it. It was pretty annoying hearing music all the way inside your bedroom at night, but no one ever complained. Anyway, we started to hear music playing from his house. I remember thinking, what the hell does he listen to? This sounds like cheesy porno music. My friend is dying laughing because of how strange the music is. Then I start hearing moaning. Yep, I was right. It started out quietly and you really had to listen to hear it. Then he turned it up. Now porn is playing loud enough for every surrounding house to hear. My friend and I are crying, doubled over laughing, but at the same time, we're terrified because we knew that he could hear us. So now we're sitting in the car hearing, "Yes, Daddy," along with excessive gagging noises, trying to comprehend what the hell was going on. I start filming and send it to all of my friends because that shit is pretty funny. But then it stops. After this, we see a figure walk across the room in front of the glass door. It's Steve and he's naked again. And he knows we could see him. He stands there for God knows how long. We're freaking out and don't know what to do. I text my dad to come outside and save us, but I get no response. Eventually, I have her drive me to my garage to let me inside. Then she speeds off. I try to tell my parents again, but they didn't care, since nothing was fixed the last time. Later that night, around 2 a.m., another friend decided to show up at my house. I sat outside with him and told him about the whole thing. He also had another friend with him, who was in the back seat of his car eating Wendy's. Then, at around 2 a.m., Creepy Steve and his lady friend walk out of the front door to walk their dog around the neighborhood. They leave their front door open and unlocked. Then the friend eating Wendy's decides to run up, open the door and throw his fries all over their living room. Not exactly the revenge I wanted, but it was pretty funny. Shortly after that, we moved away and I haven't seen him since. So yeah, Creepy Steve. Let's not meet again. Number 3. A little backstory. I'm a 16-year-old boy, but when this happened, I was around 13 or 14. It all began around June, when I awoke to someone knocking on the front door. Confused, I get up and go see who's knocking. I open the door and a man in his late 50s, early 60s is standing there with his wife and twin daughters, who were 10. I call for my mom and go back to my room. Later, my mom comes by and tells me they're the new neighbors. I didn't really care. So life goes on with them as our new neighbors, and I noticed that the man, whom I'll call Jeff, has been really passive-aggressive with me. This I didn't care much about either. So a month passes by and my birthday's in 3 days. I'm excited and I get to have my best friends over. Back then, my friends and I were really into playing in the woods. There's a small area of woods next to my house and I decided I would clear out a spot so we could play. We knew the owner of the land and he said it was okay to play there. While I'm picking up some sticks, I hear someone yelling. I notice Jeff at his front door yelling at me, and I hear him scream for me to get the hell off his property. We live in a cul-de-sac, so I live on one side of the woods and he lives on the other. I was so confused because he didn't own the land I was on. I decided to ignore him and continue to work. He then walks over, grabs me by my arm and drags me to my front door. He starts screaming at me and my parents. My parents call the police and they arrive, all the while he's continuously yelling that I was on his property. Well, I never was. Nothing happens and the police have us go our separate ways. Fast forward to my birthday, and my friends and I are playing in the woods. As we're playing, we hear the bushes rustle. We point our flashlights at them and what we saw still creeps me out. There in the bushes was Jeff. Right as we notice him, he runs back to his house and we do the same. I rush inside to tell my parents and they again call the police. And again nothing happens because he didn't do anything wrong. We go to bed and that was the last incident for the rest of the summer. It's now August and school starts. Jeff's twin daughters were friends with my sister, whom I'll call Kate. All three are in the same class and grade together. They all seem like good friends. One Saturday afternoon, the twins are playing outside when suddenly, I hear a window downstairs break. I head downstairs and the window on the front door is shattered. My mom sees it and I tell her it was Kate and the twins. As I'm saying this, I hear Kate from upstairs yelling, "What happened?" I go outside and see the twins hiding behind one of the bushes in the front yard. I asked them if they broke the window, and they said it was them. I tell them to go home, and I go inside to tell my mom. She goes over to tell Jeff, and before my mom can finish, he screams at her saying that his perfect angels wouldn't do that. My mom comes back and goes in her room. I didn't know what happened, but we just got the window repaired, and that was that. Over the next 2 weeks, I noticed that things are being moved around in our garage and front yard. I just thought it was my siblings or my parents. I walk in the garage and see the twins moving my brother's bike. I yell at them and they go home crying. Apparently, they've been doing this the whole time, and I'm pissed. I tell my mom and she once again calls the police. They say to just lock the door. The next day I head over to a friend's house. While I was gone, Jeff came over and started yelling at my parents, saying that I attacked his twins. I didn't. My parents never told me all of what he said, but apparently he threatened to kill me. Great. Now I'm terrified of ever being home alone, afraid that he would kill me. It's now the day before Christmas Eve and I'm outside playing on my phone. Suddenly, the twins come out of nowhere and grab my phone and run. I chase after them, but they run inside their house. I knock on the door and Jeff answers. I tell him that the twins have my phone. I was so scared, but I wanted my phone. He goes and gets it, then throws it on the ground, shattering it. I scream at him and he pushes me down and says to get off his property. I call the police and he says that I try to rape his daughters. I'm brought in for questioning, and after a while they let me go because they figured I didn't do that. I get home and cry. I was so mad at him, but also afraid of him. I didn't go outside the rest of winter break. So let's talk about his last month in my town. It's May and school just finished. I'm in my room and I hear the twins and Kate playing. All of a sudden, I hear Kate crying extremely loud, and I tell my dad. We run outside to see Kate crying, laying on the ground with a gash in her head and a bloody rock next to her. My dad goes to help her. It turns out the twins hit my sister with a rock. I start yelling at the twins and Jeff, then his wife comes out. I tell the wife what happened and she starts freaking out. She had to have said sorry at least 4 times while getting the twins. Jeff then says that Kate probably attacked the twins, and my dad exploded. He punches Jeff square in the face and knocks him out. My mom calms my dad down and he takes Kate to the hospital. I help Jeff inside his house because his wife asked me to, and she has always been nice to us. Once I'm done with that, I go home and the police are called. No one presses charges and Jeff and his family leave 2 weeks later. So yeah, that's my story about my crazy neighbor. So Jeff and your twins, let's not meet again. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed. Until next time.